If you're watching this, please subscribe. If we hadn't gone jogging that morning, maybe Daddy would still be alive. Maybe I wouldn't still hear his voice in my dreams. They say when something tragic is about to happen, you feel it in the air. But that morning was perfect. Clear skies, gentle breeze, no sign of anything wrong. It was a typical Saturday morning in Abuja, and as usual, Daddy and I were preparing to go jogging. We'd made it a tradition, something just for the two of us. I remember the sound of the kettle whistling as I tied my shoelaces. Mom was in the kitchen, humming a gospel tune. Daddy walked up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and kissed her on the cheek. Love birds, I teased, grinning as I grabbed my water bottle. We no go resto. They both laughed. Mom blushed and shook her head, pretending to push him away. Daddy just chuckled, grabbed his towel, and gave me a wink. Let's go before the sun comes out. The streets were quiet, not many people out that early. Birds chirped, a few dogs barked in the distance. We jogged side by side, my earphones bouncing against my chest as we passed familiar houses, small kiosks, and morning sweepers with their long brooms. We crossed the pedestrian bridge near the main road. That's when it all started. From the top of the bridge, Daddy suddenly slowed down. He squinted into the distance, then pointed. Vicky. See that? He said, his voice low. I followed his gaze and saw 3 young men, probably in their late teens or early 20s, crouched in front of a provision store. One had a rod in his hand, trying to force the shutter open. The other 2 were keeping watch. Are they trying to break in? I asked, suddenly alert. Daddy didn't answer immediately. He stopped jogging and stood still, his expression darkening. Stay here, he said to me. Don't move. Daddy, don't. But he was already walking briskly toward them. From the bridge, I watched him approach the boys. His steps were confident but calm. That's who he was. Never one to look for trouble, but never the kind to walk away from it either. He raised his voice a bit, but I couldn't hear everything. I caught snippets like, "What are you doing?" And, "You know this is someone's business?" He wasn't shouting, just talking firmly like someone addressing younger brothers. The boys looked uneasy. One stepped forward, gesturing as if to explain. For a brief moment, I thought they would listen. Then everything changed. The boy with the rod suddenly swung it. Daddy dodged, grabbed the boy's wrist, and shoved him back. The other 2 rushed forward. It turned into a full-blown scuffle. My heart jumped. Daddy, leave them! Just leave them! I screamed from the bridge. He was holding his own, blocking punches, pushing one of them off. Then one of the boys stepped back, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a knife. No! I screamed, already halfway down the stairs. He lunged forward and stabbed Daddy in the side. Everything after that felt like a slow-motion movie. Daddy staggered, then in a burst of strength, snatched the knife from him and drove it into the boy's stomach. The boy screamed and fell back, clutching his belly. But the other 2 didn't stop. They kept attacking. They stabbed Daddy again and again. Blood soaked his jogging shorts. His legs gave way. He fell forward, hitting the pavement hard. No! Daddy! I screamed, running toward him. There was blood everywhere. So much blood. I dropped to my knees beside him. His eyes were half open, looking at me, but not really seeing. I held his hand. It was cold. Help! Somebody help! I screamed into the empty street. But it was still early. No cars, no passers-by, just me, my father, and a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The 2 other boys ran off, disappearing into the shadows. The one Daddy had stabbed lay on the ground, moaning, unable to move. I cradled my father's head, sobbing, "Please don't go. Please, you'll be okay. We'll go back home. Mommy's waiting." But he didn't respond. His chest stopped rising. His fingers let go of mine. And in that moment, I knew he was gone. I don't remember how long I stayed there, kneeling beside Daddy, holding his hand, whispering to him like he could still hear me. His blood had soaked through my joggers. My hands were sticky, but I didn't care. I just wanted him to open his eyes and tell me it was all a mistake. "Daddy, please don't do this," I kept saying. "You can't leave me, not like this." People eventually started to come out. One man in a vest and boxers rushed toward us. A woman with a wrapper tied around her chest screamed when she saw my dad's body. Cars began to slow down. Bystanders gathered, whispering, staring, some of them taking pictures with their phones. I hated them for it. "Call ambulance!" I shouted. "Please!" The boy Daddy stabbed was still groaning on the pavement a few meters away. Some men moved closer to him but didn't touch him. No one knew if he had more weapons or if others were nearby. Someone finally called the police. I don't know who. It felt like I had left my body. Like I was watching the entire thing from outside of myself. Someone brought me a sachet of water. I took it and just stared at it. I couldn't drink. My mouth was dry, but my throat refused to swallow. When the police and an ambulance arrived, it was almost 6:30. The paramedics checked my dad, shook their heads, and quietly covered his body. That was when it hit me all over again. He was really gone. I followed them to the hospital silently. I didn't even think about my mom yet. I couldn't. I was afraid of how I would tell her what words I could possibly use to shatter her world the way mine had just been shattered. But someone had already called her. When I returned home, hours later, soaked in tears, blood, and exhaustion, the compound was already full. Our neighbors had gathered. Some were seated outside. Others stood in clusters, whispering, crying. The moment I entered the house, I saw her. She was lying on the floor in the parlor, surrounded by women fanning her and trying to revive her. "Mama fainted when she heard," one of the women said to me. I rushed to her side. "Mommy, please, wake up," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Mommy, I'm here." After a few minutes, her eyes opened slowly. She looked around, confused, and then her gaze fell on me, her face twisted in pain. "Where is he?" she asked. "Tell me he's not... Vicky, tell me your father is not dead." I couldn't. The only thing I could do was hold her tightly as she wailed. The sound that came from her chest that morning is something I will never forget. It wasn't just a cry. It was the sound of a heart tearing in two. Later that afternoon, we went to the mortuary. She wanted to see him. She needed to see him. When the attendant pulled back the white cloth covering his body, Mommy collapsed again. I held her up, both of us shaking. She cupped his face, whispering things only she and God could understand. "Why did you go there?" she cried. Why didn't you just keep jogging? You were only trying to help. Why?" She stayed beside his body until they asked us to leave. Her tears didn't stop. Mine didn't either. The boy who stabbed Daddy was still in the hospital, under police guard. We were told he was in a critical condition but alive. The police said he'd been arrested and was being questioned. They wanted names, and he gave them. He told them who the other boys were. One of them had already fled the area, but the other was caught within 2 days. None of that brought Daddy back. By Sunday morning, the whole street was in mourning. All the shops were closed. The provision store he died trying to protect stayed shut. People laid flowers by its front door. Some neighbors hung a small banner on our gate that read, "Rest in peace, Mr. Ephraim, a good man, a brave man." He was well known, not just because he was kind and always had a smile on his face, but because he genuinely cared. If someone's car broke down, he'd help push it. If someone's child fell sick, he'd drive them to the hospital. He didn't have much, but he gave what he could. Now he was gone, and I didn't know how to live in a world that didn't have him in it. They buried Daddy on a Wednesday. The sun was out that morning, but it felt like the world was covered in gray. Our compound was packed again. Chairs, canopies, plates of jollof rice going untouched, murmured prayers, children clinging to their mother's wrappers, not understanding the heaviness in the air. I wore black. My mom did too. Her eyes were swollen from crying. I hadn't seen her eat anything in 2 days. She just sat on the edge of the bed most times, staring at the wall like she was waiting for him to walk in and say it was all just a bad dream. The pastor spoke, but I can't tell you what he said. I only heard the final words before they lowered his casket into the ground. May his soul rest in perfect peace. I couldn't hold it anymore. I fell on my knees, screaming, "Daddy! Daddy, please take me with you!" I had to be carried away. The boy who stabbed him survived his wound. He was arrested right after he was discharged from the hospital. The police told us he was 19 years old. Just 19. His name was Yusuf. He confessed. Told the police that they were sent to break into the provision store by one older guy from the area who had given them keys that didn't work. They got frustrated and decided to force the lock. He said they didn't plan to kill anyone. That didn't make it better. The names he gave helped the police arrest the other two. One of them was hiding with his cousin in another part of the city, but he was eventually caught. All three were charged for armed robbery and murder. People expected me to feel relief. I didn't. Justice doesn't bring back the dead. It doesn't fill the space in the living room where Daddy's laughter used to echo. It doesn't replace the sound of his slippers on the tile every morning when he'd go check the front gate. It just exists. 1 week after the funeral, some youth in the area organized a candlelight walk for Daddy. They lit candles from the provision store all the way to the pedestrian bridge where it happened. Someone printed shirts with his face and the words, "Rest on Hero." They sang, prayed, shared memories. I walked at the front, holding Mommy's hand. We were both in tears the entire time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, thinking about all the little moments I'd taken for granted. How Daddy always insisted we jog together, even on the days I wanted to sleep in. How he would tap my head gently and say, "Wakey, wakey, Miss Vicky." Life doesn't wait. I remembered how he always paused at that same pedestrian bridge to stretch his legs and tell me stories about his own youth. I remembered how proud he was of me, how he called me his star. And now he was gone. Because he couldn't ignore injustice. Because he saw something wrong and believed it was his duty to make it right. Some people told us he should have minded his business. That if he had just looked away, he would still be alive. I hated hearing that. Not because they were wrong, but because they might have been right. But I also know my father. He couldn't walk past a robbery and say nothing. That wasn't who he was. And that's the hardest part. He died being true to himself. We're still healing. Mommy is trying, day by day. She cries less now, but sometimes I catch her staring at his photo in the sitting room for hours. I'm back in school. But I'm not the same girl I was before that morning jog. I've changed. I've become more protective, more cautious, but I've also become more proud. Because my dad didn't die for nothing. He died doing the right thing, the hard thing. He stood up when others would have walked away. And now, I carry his story with me. Every time I cross that pedestrian bridge, I pause. I look down at the spot where he took his last breath and I whisper, "I love you, Daddy. Thank you for being brave." This isn't just a story about violence. It's a story about courage, about sacrifice, about the pain of loss and the weight of memory. And even though the silence is still loud in our home, his legacy speaks louder. For more stories, please subscribe.